Hello, I'm Alexander Hamilton. I was born on the island of Nevis in the Caribbean in either 1755 or 1757. My early life was marked by hardship. My father left when I was young, and when my mother died of fever, I became an orphan before I was even a teenager. To survive, I worked as a clerk for a trading firm on St. Croix. Managing ships, cargo, and accounts gave me an early education in commerce. A letter I wrote describing a hurricane caught the attention of local supporters who raised the funds to send me to mainland America. In 1772, I arrived in New York with ambition as my only real possession. I lived with the patriot Hercules Mulligan while studying at King's College. As tensions with Britain rose, I wrote pamphlets defending colonial rights, gaining recognition as a young voice for independence. When the revolution began, I joined a militia and soon became captain of an artillery company. My performance at the Battle of Trenton brought me to the attention of General George Washington, who appointed me his aide-de-camp. Though I longed for battlefield command, my years with Washington taught me strategy, leadership, and the challenges of holding a fragile army together. In 1781, I finally returned to combat and led a key assault at Yorktown, helping secure American victory. After the war, I married Elizabeth Schuyler and turned to shaping the new nation. I helped push for the Constitutional Convention and wrote many of the Federalist Papers to explain and defend the proposed Constitution. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, I created the foundations of America's financial system: federal credit, a national bank, and policies to strengthen industry. My life ended in 1804 after a duel with Aaron Burr, but I hope the legacy I left behind continues to speak for me, a belief that even from the humblest beginnings, one can help build a nation.
I am William Parker, born in 1740 near Abingdon, Maryland, into a family of prosperous planters. From an early age, I was taught the value of reason, duty, and service to one's country. I attended the College of Philadelphia, now the University of Pennsylvania, and afterwards studied law in Annapolis. In 1761, I began practicing in the local courts, where I earned a reputation for careful preparation and clear argument. As British policies grew more oppressive, I joined with other patriots to form the Sons of Liberty. In 1767, opposing the Stamp Act, I was elected to the lower house of the Maryland Assembly. There, I worked steadily against parliamentary overreach. When the intolerable acts punished Boston for the Tea Party, I helped organize local committees of correspondence and resistance. I was chosen as a delegate to the First Continental Congress, where I labored on resolutions and petitions seeking justice and reconciliation. In the summer of 1776, the Maryland Convention initially instructed its delegates to vote against independence. But by early July, wiser heads prevailed. On July the 2nd, I cast my vote in favor of independence. 4 weeks later, I proudly signed the Declaration of Independence as a representative of Maryland. During the war, I served on the newly created Court of Appeals in Congress, reviewing complex legal matters that arose from the conflict. In 1782, I was elected governor of Maryland. I worked diligently to support our returning veterans and to stabilize the state in peacetime. By 1786, I became a leading voice among the anti-federalists in the Maryland House. I argued that the proposed Constitution lacked sufficient protections for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and the rights of the accused. Many of those concerns were later addressed in the Bill of Rights. For the final decade of my life, I served as a judge on the United States District Court for Maryland, applying the law with fairness and precision until my death in 1799. I sought always to serve Maryland and the nation through reason, steady judgment, and quiet resolve. That legacy, I believe, endures in the republic we helped create.
I am Francis Hopkinson, born the 2nd of October, 1737 in Philadelphia. The eldest of 8 children to Thomas Hopkinson, a man of prominence. My father passed when I was 14, but my mother ensured I received the finest education. I was the first student at the Academy of Philadelphia, graduating in 1757, and earned my master's in 1760. A man of many talents, I studied law, passed the bar in 1761, and practiced in Philadelphia and Bordentown, New Jersey. Yet my true weapons were ink and melody. I composed secular songs, played the harpsichord, wrote poetry, and invented devices, earning praise as ingenious, though John Adams once jested my head was not bigger than a large apple. I took that as a compliment to my wit. As British oppression grew, I turned my pen against tyranny. In 1766, I published A Pretty Story, a sharp satire on King George III. Later came The Prophecy and biting verses ridiculing loyalists. My words stirred the spirit of independence. In 1776, New Jersey sent me to the Continental Congress. On the 2nd of August, I signed the Declaration of Independence, committing my life and honor to freedom. I served on the Navy Board, helped design continental currency, and claimed the first American flag with stars and stripes, though Congress refined it. After the war, I advocated for the Constitution, chairing celebrations for Pennsylvania's ratification in 1788 with Charles Wilson Peel. I served as judge of the Admiralty Court, then federal district judge for Eastern Pennsylvania under President Washington until my end. I passed suddenly on the 9th of May, 1791 in Philadelphia from an apoplectic seizure at 53, buried in Christ Church burial ground. I was no soldier with musket, but with satire, song, seal, and signature I helped forge a nation. My ridicule of tyrants and celebration of liberty, I trust, echo still in the republic we built.
I was born on February 22, 1732, at my family's plantation along Pope's Creek in Westmoreland County, Virginia. My father died when I was just 11, and from that point on, I helped my mother manage our home near Fredericksburg. I had little formal schooling, but I learned discipline, mathematics, and surveying, skills that would shape my early years. As a young man, I ventured into the wilderness as a surveyor, and before long, I found myself drawn into military service. During the French and Indian War, I served with the Virginia Regiment and learned difficult but invaluable lessons about leadership, conflict, and perseverance. In 1759, I married Martha Dandridge Custis, a widow with 2 children. Together, we created a warm home at Mount Vernon, where I became a farmer and managed a growing estate. The rhythm of the land might have defined my life had conflict with Great Britain not threatened the liberties of the colonies. When the Continental Congress assembled, I was chosen to lead the Continental Army. The years that followed were filled with hardship, long winters, scarce supplies, and battles won and lost. But through the determination of our soldiers and the support of our allies, we secured independence from the British Crown. That victory remains one of the greatest honors of my life. After the war, I hoped to retire quietly at Mount Vernon. Yet our new nation needed stability and direction. When I was asked to preside over the Constitutional Convention of 1787, I accepted, believing firmly in the need for unity and strong but balanced government. 2 years later, I was unanimously elected the first president of the United States, the only president ever to receive every electoral vote. During my 2 terms, I focused on building a foundation for this republic, establishing federal institutions, setting precedents for the presidency, and guiding the young nation through conflicts abroad without falling into war. I declined a 3rd term, believing that leadership must never become the possession of one man. In retirement, I returned once more to Mount Vernon, where I oversaw my estate and made a final personal stand for my principles by arranging for the people I enslaved to gain their freedom after my wife's death.
On December 14th, 1799, after a sudden throat infection, my life came to its close. But the nation I helped build endured and continues to strive toward the ideals of liberty and self-government. I am humbled to have served this country, and I trust that future generations will guard our hard-won independence with wisdom and virtue.
I am Benjamin Rush, born the 4th of January 1746 in Byberry, Pennsylvania, to a pious Presbyterian family. Raised with faith and diligence, I entered the College of New Jersey, now Princeton, and graduated at 14 in 1760, the youngest in my class. Medicine called me next. I apprenticed in Philadelphia, then crossed the Atlantic to earn my medical degree from the University of Edinburgh in 1768. Returning home in 1769, I established my practice in Philadelphia. That same year, I took the chair of chemistry at the College of Philadelphia and published America's first chemistry textbook. My work in medicine broke new ground. I pioneered humane treatment for the mentally ill and am called the father of American psychiatry. After the war, I founded the Philadelphia Dispensary, our nation's first free medical clinic, to serve the poor. I was an early voice for justice, advocating women's education, the abolition of slavery, and independence from Britain. I joined the Sons of Liberty and helped shape Thomas Paine's Common Sense, that pamphlet which fired the hearts of patriots. In 1776, Pennsylvania sent me to the Continental Congress. I signed the Declaration of Independence, pledging my life and honor to liberty. Not re-elected the next year, due to my opposition to our state constitution, I accepted the post of Surgeon General in the Middle Department of the Continental Army, but I could not abide the wretched conditions our soldiers endured. I resigned in anger in 1778 and, for a time, supported efforts to replace General Washington, a misstep that cost me dearly in reputation. Yet my devotion to healing and reform endured. President John Adams appointed me Treasurer of the United States Mint, and I labored to reconcile Adams and Jefferson in their later years, a friendship restored that benefited the young republic. I passed from this world on the 19th of April, 1813, in Philadelphia, after a brief fever. I lived to heal bodies and souls, to champion equality, and to help birth a free nation. My aim was true, and I trust the fruits of my labors endure.
Greetings, citizen of this sovereign nation. I am Francis Lewis, born March 21st, 1713, in Llandaff, Wales, a land of ancient hills and unyielding spirit. Orphaned young, raised by my aunt, educated in Scotland and London, I inherited my father's modest estate at 21 and crossed the Atlantic in 1734, seeking fortune in the American colonies. In New York and Philadelphia, my mercantile trade flourished. Ships, goods, connections across seas. During the French and Indian War, I contracted to supply British troops with uniforms. But at Fort Oswego in 1756, French forces captured the fort. I was taken prisoner, not killed, though many faced worse. They shipped me to France, where I endured 7 long years in captivity, before a prisoner exchange freed me in 1763. The British granted me 5,000 acres in New York as recompense, yet those lost years taught me the cost of distant rule. Back home, I rebuilt my business and turned to politics. The Stamp Act of 1765 outraged me. No taxation without representation. I joined the Sons of Liberty, protested, and advocated for our rights. When war came, I was elected to the Continental Congress in 1775. New York hesitated on independence, so my delegation abstained July 2nd and 4th. But once authorized, I signed the Declaration on August 2nd, 1776, pledging life, fortune, and honor to the cause. I supplied the Continental Army with clothing, weapons, provisions, whatever was needed. Yet the price was steep. British troops pillaged my Long Island home, and my dear wife Elizabeth was captured, held in brutal conditions as retaliation. Released in exchange, she never recovered her health and passed in 1779. The loss broke something in me. I withdrew from public life, spending my remaining years with family. I lived to see the Republic established, dying December 31st, 1802, at 89. From Welsh shores to Philadelphia's Hall, I crossed oceans and endured chains for liberty, not for glory, but because free men must govern themselves. My friend, this freedom you enjoy was bought with sacrifice, mine, my wife's, countless others. Guard it fiercely against tyranny in any form. The experiment continues because we dared to sign.
I am George Wythe, born in late 1726 or early 1727 at Chesterville, the family plantation on Back River in Elizabeth City County, Virginia. My father, Thomas Wythe, died when I was young. My mother, Margaret Walker Wythe, taught me Latin and Greek, and I received little formal schooling beyond that. My uncle, Stephen Dewey, guided my early legal studies, though I often read alone by candlelight. By age 20, in 1746, I was admitted to the Virginia Bar. I built a successful practice in Williamsburg, served in the House of Burgesses from the 1750s to 1760s, and opposed the Stamp Act with measured but firm resolve. As Clerk of the House from 1768, I watched the rising storm. In 1775, Virginia sent me to the Second Continental Congress. Though illness and duties kept me from Philadelphia on July 4th, I returned in September to sign the Declaration of Independence. My name placed first among Virginians, a quiet honor for one who spoke for reason over passion. Back home, I helped draft Virginia's first Constitution, and with Thomas Jefferson and Edmund Pendleton, revised our laws to align with Republican principles. In 1778, I became Chancellor of Virginia's High Court of Chancery, where I served until my death, twice ruling slavery unconstitutional in cases like Pleasants versus Pleasants, though overruled each time. I freed my own slaves, living by the conscience I urged on others. From 1779 to 1789, I held the first professorship of law in America at the College of William and Mary, teaching not only jurisprudence but ethics and classical thought. Among my students were Thomas Jefferson, who studied under me for 5 years, John Marshall, future Chief Justice, and Henry Clay. I shaped minds that shaped the nation. I attended the Constitutional Convention in 1787 briefly, helped moderate Virginia's ratification debates in 1788, and continued private teaching in Richmond after resigning from William and Mary. I passed from this life on June 8, 1806 in Richmond, likely poisoned by my grandnephew George Sweeney, though justice was never fully served. I sought always to teach reason, uphold justice, and nurture liberty through knowledge. If my legacy endures, it is in the laws we reformed and the leaders I helped form.
Hello, I am John Adams, a lawyer, statesman, and political thinker whose convictions helped shape the birth of the United States of America. I was born on October 30th, 1735, in Braintree, Massachusetts. My early education at the Braintree Latin School prepared me for Harvard College, where I entered at the age of 16. Afterward, I studied law and opened my own practice in 1758. In 1764, I married Abigail Smith, the remarkable woman who became my closest confidant and the mother of our 6 children. Although I was initially reluctant to enter the political fray, the Stamp Act of 1765 stirred my sense of duty. I began writing essays championing the patriot cause, and soon found myself recognized as one of the strongest voices for American independence. Yet even while opposing British policies, I believed firmly in justice. That is why I agreed to defend the British soldiers involved in the Boston Massacre, for in a free society, even the accused deserve a fair trial. In 1774, I was chosen as a delegate to the First Continental Congress, and I returned the following year for the second. There I played a role in drafting the Declaration of Independence. I wrote to Abigail that the second day of July 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America, for that was the day the resolution for independence was approved. Years later, in 1789, I became the first Vice President of the United States, serving under George Washington. I assumed the presidency myself on March 4th, 1797. During my term, I worked tirelessly to keep our young nation out of war with France and to preserve our fragile unity. I was also the first president to reside in what would come to be known as the White House. In time, I renewed my friendship with my old political rival, Thomas Jefferson. Remarkably, on July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I passed from this world at the age of 90. My final words were said to have been, "Jefferson still survives," unaware that he had died only hours earlier. My life was devoted to liberty, justice, and the enduring promise of a nation founded on the rights of its people. And I am honored that my story continues to be remembered today.
I am Robert Treat Paine, born the 11th of March, 1731, in Boston, Massachusetts, the son of a pastor who turned to trade and a descendant of Mayflower passenger Stephen Hopkins. At 14, I entered Harvard College, graduating at 18 with a mind sharpened for service. My early path wandered. I taught school, preached sermons, even sailed as a whaler to the icy shores of Greenland. But law became my calling. In 1761, I settled in Taunton and built a respected practice. My name rose alongside my rival, John Adams. In 1770, we stood on opposite sides in the Boston Massacre trial. I prosecuted the British soldiers. Adams defended them. After 6 days of fierce argument, the soldiers were acquitted, yet my conduct earned the respect of many. In 1774, Massachusetts elected me to the Continental Congress. On the 2nd of August, 1776, I signed the Declaration of Independence, committing my life, fortune, and honor to the cause of freedom. Returning home, I served in the Massachusetts House as Speaker and helped draft our state constitution. I became the Commonwealth's first Attorney General, prosecuting the leaders of Shays' Rebellion to preserve order in our young republic. From 1790 until 1804, I sat as a justice on the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, dispensing justice with impartiality and rigor. Late in life, I helped found the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, believing knowledge and virtue must sustain liberty. I passed from this world on the 11th of May, 1814, at 83, and was laid to rest in Boston's Granary Burying Ground, near the very victims of the massacre I once prosecuted. Though lesser known today than Hancock or the Adamses, I labored steadfastly as lawyer, legislator, judge, and patriot. My mark endures in the laws, the Constitution, and the enduring republic we forged.
I am Joseph Hughes, born the 9th of July, 1730, near Princeton in New Jersey, to Aaron and Providence Hughes, devoted members of the Society of Friends. Raised in a Quaker household with a strict religious upbringing and sound public education, I learned early the values of plain living, integrity, and hard work. Around 1750, I journeyed to Philadelphia to apprentice under the successful merchant Joseph Ogden, gaining experience in shipping, importing, and trade, traveling ports from Boston to the Caribbean. In 1760, seeking greater opportunity, I settled in Edenton, North Carolina. There I built prosperous mercantile businesses, partnering with my friend the lawyer Robert Smith. We acquired a wharf and a small fleet of vessels. My life might have remained one of quiet commerce, but fate intervened. I became engaged, yet my fiancée passed before our wedding. I never married, devoting myself instead to my adopted home and the cause of liberty. In 1763, shortly after arriving, the people of Edenton elected me to the North Carolina Assembly, where I served until 1775. I helped draft the Halifax Resolves, which boldly instructed our delegates to seek independence if reconciliation failed. I also contributed to the Olive Branch Petition, a final humble appeal to King George III outlining our grievances and pleading for peace. He rejected it outright, declaring us in rebellion. In 1775, North Carolina sent me to the Second Continental Congress. There I served on the Committee of Claims, helped prepare the Articles of Confederation, and most importantly, chaired the Naval Committee. Drawing on my merchant experience, I invested my own wealth, leveraged my networks, and sacrificed profits to outfit the first American warships. I secured commissions for officers, including young John Paul Jones, and placed my fleet at the service of the Continental Forces. John Adams and I laid the very foundation of what would become the United States Navy. On the 2nd of August, 1776, I signed the Declaration of Independence alongside my fellow North Carolinians, William Hooper and John Penn, committing my life, fortune, and sacred honor to the cause. After a prolonged illness, I passed from this world on the 10th of November, 1779, in Philadelphia, far from my beloved Edenton. I lived as a merchant turned patriot, giving all to advance liberty and build a navy for a free nation. That sacrifice, I trust, endures.
Good evening, my friends. I stand before you not as a figure of legend, but as a man shaped by the trials and passions of my time. I was born in 1736 at Studley in Hanover County, Virginia, into a family that valued learning and service. My father, John Henry, was a well-educated Scotsman who served his community as a surveyor and a justice of the county court. From him, I learned discipline and a respect for the written word. My path to purpose, however, was far from straight. As a young man, I failed twice in business and once as a farmer. Yet these disappointments pushed me toward the study of law, a decision that revealed the true calling of my voice. By 1760, I had earned admission to the bar, and before long, I found myself speaking for those whose rights had been threatened. In 1763, during what became known as the Parsons Cause, I challenged the authority of the Crown itself, defending the people of Virginia against unjust interference. It was in that courtroom that my oratorical abilities first caught public attention. I spoke out for natural rights, rights that come not from kings, but from the very nature of man. As tensions with Great Britain grew, so did my resolve. By 1775, at the Virginia Convention in Richmond, I could no longer stay silent. Surrounded by delegates uncertain of the future, I urged action. I called for courage, and I ended with the words that would echo through the colonies: "Give me liberty or give me death." Those words were not crafted for effect. They were the truest expression of my heart. When independence became reality, I had the honor of serving as the first governor of a free Virginia from 1776 to 1779, and again from 1784 to 1786. I worked tirelessly to strengthen our defenses and guide our young state through the early storms of nationhood. Though others may have excelled in strategy or scholarship, I devoted myself to awakening the spirit of liberty in the minds of my fellow Virginians. In the years that followed, I continued to speak for the protection of individual freedoms. Government, I believed, must always be held accountable to the people. My journey ended in 1799 at my home in Red Hill, but the cause to which I gave my voice and my life, the cause of liberty, lives on in every person who dares to stand for their rights. I was but one voice, yet I learned that a single voice, spoken with conviction, can help ignite the will of a people. And so I speak to you now as I spoke then. Cherish your freedom, defend it boldly, and never take lightly the power of your own voice.
I am Samuel Chase, born the 17th of April, 1741, near Princess Anne in Maryland, the only son of Reverend Thomas Chase and Matilda Walker. My father, an Anglican minister, gave me a classical education at home. I studied law in Annapolis and was admitted to the bar in 1761 at 20 years old. I chose to serve the common folk, farmers, tradesmen, often without fee, for I believe justice must not be reserved for the wealthy alone. At 3 and 20, my neighbors elected me to the Maryland General Assembly, where I served from 1764 to 1784. When Parliament imposed the Stamp Act in 1765, a tax without our consent, I rose against it fiercely, helping lead resistance as a son of liberty. I carried that fire to the Continental Congress. I sat in both the first and second, and on the 2nd of August, 1776, I affixed my name to the Declaration of Independence. That same year, with Benjamin Franklin and Charles Carroll, I journeyed through bitter winter to Canada, seeking to draw Quebec to our cause. We did not succeed, but our effort proved our devotion to liberty. After the war, I practiced law and served as a judge in Baltimore and on Maryland's General Court. In 1796, President Washington honored me with appointment as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. A steadfast Federalist, I spoke my convictions plainly from the bench, charging juries with principles I held sacred, even when it provoked offense. In 1804, the House, swayed by President Jefferson and his Republicans, impeached me on 8 articles: charges of bias in juries, arbitrary rulings, and uttering political opinions in court. They sought to make the judiciary answer to partisan whim. Yet in March 1805, after a trial in the Senate, I was acquitted on every count. Senators of both parties voted for principle over party, establishing that a judge cannot be removed for mere political disagreement, only for grave misconduct. That acquittal fortified the independence of the federal bench for all time. I remained on the court until my death in Baltimore on the 19th of June, 1811. I lived to defend the Constitution as I understood it, to champion liberty against tyranny, and, unwittingly, to guard the judiciary from retribution. That legacy endures.
My name is Samuel Adams, and I was born on September 27th, 1722, in the city of Boston, Massachusetts. From my earliest days, I was shaped by the deeply rooted Puritan values of my parents. They taught me discipline, devotion, and the belief that a principled life is one worth living. For a time, it was expected that I would become a minister, and indeed I carried those moral convictions with me all my life. But destiny had other plans. I graduated from Harvard College in 1740, a young man still searching for his place. Rather than entering the ministry, I found myself drawn to public affairs. The injustices that I saw growing between the British Crown and the American colonies awakened something deep within me, an unwavering conviction that liberty must be defended at any cost. My path led me into politics. I served in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, where I learned firsthand the increasing dangers of British overreach. In time, I would also serve in the Continental Congress, standing alongside men who shared my belief in the natural rights of the people. By the 1770s, I had become known as one of the most outspoken advocates for American independence. I never sought fame, only justice,
but my voice carried far. Along with other patriots, I helped form the Sons of Liberty, a group determined to resist British tyranny. It was we who organized the protests that would come to be known as the Boston Tea Party, destroying British tea in defiance of unjust taxation. Though controversial, we believed it was necessary, a spark to awaken a sleeping continent. My role in the cause did not go unnoticed. When the fighting began at Lexington and Concord, the British government sought to pacify the colonists by offering pardons to all who laid down their arms, all except John Hancock and myself. To them, we were dangerous instigators. To me, that was proof enough that our cause was righteous. At the First and Second Continental Congress, I continued to push for full independence, and in 1776, I signed the Declaration of Independence. In that moment, I pledged my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor, just as every signer did, knowing full well the cost if we failed. After the war, I did not retire from public life. Instead, I helped draft the Massachusetts State Constitution, a document that would influence constitutional thought for generations. Later, I served as governor of Massachusetts, striving to safeguard the freedoms we had fought so hard to win. I lived to the age of 81, passing from this world on October 2, 1803. Upon my death, my hometown newspaper called me the father of the American Revolution. I never sought such a title. But if my words, my actions, and my steadfast belief in liberty helped bring forth a new nation, then I consider my life well spent. I only pray that future generations will cherish and defend it as fiercely as we once did. The cause of freedom has always demanded courage.
I am Thomas Paine. I was born on January 29, 1737, in the small town of Thetford, Norfolk, England, to a Quaker father and an Anglican mother. My early education was modest, just enough to learn reading, writing, and basic arithmetic, but it set me on the path of a lifelong devotion to ideas. As a young man, I worked as a corset maker alongside my father before trying my hand at a number of trades, teacher, shopkeeper, and excise officer among them. None brought me much success. I suffered personal tragedy as well. My first wife, Mary, died in childbirth, leaving me widowed and adrift. By 1774, having lost my job and with little future in England, I crossed paths with one Benjamin Franklin. He urged me to make a new start in America and even furnished me with a letter of introduction. I arrived in Philadelphia later that same year, sick from the voyage but determined to begin again. I soon found work as a journalist at the Pennsylvania Magazine. In January 1776, I published a pamphlet titled Common Sense. What I intended as a clear argument for independence became something far larger. It sold by the tens of thousands and helped ignite the call for a new American republic free from British monarchy. My words were meant for ordinary people, and it was their voice that carried the cause forward. During the Revolution, I continued writing, most famously the American Crisis Papers, beginning with the line, "These are the times that try men's souls." Our soldiers read them by campfires and carried their spirit into battle. After the war, I returned to Europe, where I defended the French Revolution in my book, Rights of Man. My support for liberty brought me praise and persecution. At one point, I was even imprisoned in France. Later, I wrote The Age of Reason, challenging the role of institutional religion in public life. It earned me fierce criticism, yet I believed, then as now, that every person has the right to think freely and question boldly. In my final years, I returned to the United States, the nation whose independence I had helped to argue into existence. I died in New York City on June 8, 1809. Though my funeral was small, my hope persists that my writings will continue to inspire all who seek freedom, equality, and the courage to speak truth to power. May my words remind you that revolutions begin not with armies, but with ideas, and with the people brave enough to voice them. Hello, I am Thomas Lynch, Jr., a son of South Carolina and a signer of the Declaration of Independence. I was born in 1749 at Hopsawee Plantation, near Georgetown, South Carolina, where my family had deep roots shaped by generations of public service and leadership. My education carried me far from home. After early schooling at the Indigo Society School, I was sent to England, where I studied at Eton, then at Cambridge, and later at the Middle Temple in London. Those years abroad refined my understanding of law, government, and the rights of Englishmen, principles that would soon guide my life's greatest work. When I returned to South Carolina in 1772, I expected a quiet life as a planter. But rising tensions with Great Britain quickly changed my course. My father, Thomas Lynch Sr., served in the Continental Congress, and when illness forced him to step down, I was elected to take his place, becoming one of the youngest delegates in Philadelphia. In 1776, I proudly signed the Declaration of Independence, standing with my fellow delegates in declaring that the American colonies were, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. It was an act of courage and an act of hope for a fairer, freer world. Though my health grew fragile, I continued to serve as long as I could. In 1779, seeking recovery, my wife and I set sail for the West Indies. Our ship disappeared at sea, and history records that we were lost to the waves. Few portraits of me survive, but those that do, engravings and paintings preserved by historians, reflect a young man devoted to principle, education, and the cause of liberty. Though my life was brief, I am honored to have played a part in the founding of our nation, a testament to how even a short life, guided by conviction, can help shape the destiny of a people.
I am Robert Morris, born the 20th of January 1734 in Liverpool, England, to a successful merchant father with deep ties to the colonies. At 13, he brought me across the Atlantic to join him in America. Tragedy struck soon after. My father was killed in an accident, leaving me virtually an orphan in this new land. Yet from humble beginnings, I rose. Apprenticed in a counting house, I learned trade, shipping, and finance. By partnering with Thomas Willing, I formed Willing, Morris & Co., one of Philadelphia's most prosperous merchant houses. By 1775, many considered me the richest man in America. That year, I entered public service, elected to the Pennsylvania Assembly and chosen as a delegate to the Second Continental Congress. I served on key committees, including those handling trade, marine affairs, and secret correspondence. When the revolution ignited, I placed my fortune and credit at the nation's disposal. I worked hand in hand with General George Washington to secure powder, arms, clothing, and provisions for the Continental Army. When Congress's funds ran dry, I extended my personal credit, borrowed from friends, and even sold my own ships to outfit the fledgling Navy. Time and again, I rescued the cause from ruin, personally guaranteeing loans, advancing money from my own pocket, and keeping supplies flowing when despair threatened to end the fight. In August 1776, though I had initially abstained, I signed the Declaration of Independence, committing my life and wealth to liberty. Later, in 1781, Congress appointed me Superintendent of Finance, the nation's first true financial executive. I reformed the system, established the Bank of North America, stabilized currency, and financed the final campaigns that led to victory at Yorktown. I also signed the Articles of Confederation and, in 1787, the U.S. Constitution, one of only 2 men to sign all 3 foundational documents. My later years brought hardship. Debts from wartime advances led to imprisonment. But I never regretted my sacrifices for this republic. I passed from this life on the 8th of May, 1806 in Philadelphia. I lived to turn commerce into the sinews of freedom. Without sound finance, independence might have been lost. That legacy, I believe, endures in the United States of America.
I am George Walton, born around 1749 near Farmville in the colony of Virginia. Orphaned young, I was raised by an uncle with 13 children of his own. With little formal schooling, I apprenticed as a carpenter, working long days by day, then teaching myself to read by firelight at night, for my master denied me even a candle. In 1769, seeking greater prospects, I moved to Savannah, Georgia. There I studied law, was admitted to the bar in 1774, and soon found my calling not just in courtrooms, but in the cause of liberty. That year, I helped organize Georgia's resistance. We gathered at Tondy's Tavern to denounce the intolerable acts imposed by Parliament. Those meetings birthed the first Georgia Provincial Congress in January 1775 and a second in July, where I served and rose in the militia ranks. In 1776, Georgia appointed me a delegate to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. I arrived after much of the debate, but I heard John Adams speak passionately on that fateful day. As I later wrote, since the 1st of July 1776, my conduct has aligned with the great question resolved there, the question of independence. On the 2nd of August, I proudly signed the Declaration alongside Button Gwinnett and Lyman Hall, pledging my life, fortune, and sacred honor. Commissioned a colonel in 1778, I fought at the Siege of Savannah, where I was wounded and captured by the British. Released in 1779, I returned home to serve briefly as governor of Georgia. In 1783, I became Chief Justice of our state. I served another term as governor in 1789, helping adopt a new constitution. Though invited to the Federal Constitutional Convention in 1787, I declined, preferring to labor here in Georgia. I later sat as a Superior Court Justice and filled an unexpired term in the U.S. Senate from 1795 to 1796. I passed from this life in Augusta on the 2nd of February, 1804. From a self-taught carpenter's apprentice to a signer of the Declaration and guardian of Georgia's liberty, I gave what I could to build a free nation. That legacy, I trust, endures.
Greetings, my fellow citizen of this great republic. I am John Hancock, merchant, patriot, and the man whose name has become synonymous with a bold signature. Born on January 23, 1737, in Braintree, Massachusetts, I lost my father young in 1744. My fortunate path led me to be raised by my wealthy uncle, Thomas Hancock, one of Boston's most successful merchants. He gave me the finest education, Harvard College, class of 1754, at just 17. I apprenticed in his business, learning the ways of trade across the seas. When he passed in 1764, I inherited his vast estate, ships, warehouses, lands, and wealth that made me among the richest in the colonies. But riches alone do not define a man. In 1765, I entered public life, holding local offices and joining the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. The British taxes, the Stamp Act, the Townshend duties, struck at the heart of our liberties and our trade. I stood firm, supporting boycotts and resistance against what I saw as unjust burdens imposed without our consent. In 1768, the Crown seized my sloop Liberty on charges of smuggling. Charges later dropped, but the incident inflamed the people and elevated my voice among the patriots. I never sought confrontation for its own sake, yet I could not abide tyranny. Elected to the Continental Congress, I served as its president from 1775, guiding our deliberations through the storm of revolution. On that fateful July 4th, 1776, I had the honor of being the first to sign the Declaration of Independence. I signed large and bold. Legend says so King George could read it without his spectacles. Whether the tale is exact or not, my intent was clear. This was defiance, a pledge of life, fortune, and sacred honor, unmistakable to all. After the war's victory, I returned to Massachusetts as governor, serving multiple terms until 1793. I championed ratification of the Constitution, urged support for the Bill of Rights to secure our freedoms, and used my means to aid the poor, widows, and orphans, believing true leadership lifts the community. Liberty is fragile, my friend. I fought to establish it, not for glory, but because righteous government rests on reason and justice. I glory in avowing eternal enmity to tyranny, as I once declared. My work is complete. Yours continues.
Greetings, citizen of this hard-won republic. I am Thomas McKean, born March 19, 1734, in Chester County, Pennsylvania, son of an innkeeper and farmer, raised amid plain folk who valued hard work and honest rule. Though Pennsylvanian by birth, I studied and practiced law in Delaware, where ambition and duty called me to serve. Deputy Attorney General, Justice of the Peace, Speaker of the Colonial Assembly. In 1765, I represented Delaware at the Stamp Act Congress, denouncing Britain's grasping taxes. No representation, no obedience. That fire never dimmed. When revolution stirred, I helped dissolve British chains in Delaware and joined the Continental Congress. With Caesar Rodney's dramatic ride, we secured Delaware's vote for independence on July 2, 1776. I signed the Declaration, my name etched bold on parchment, though debates linger on the exact day. I also signed the Articles of Confederation and presided as President of Congress in 1781. I held office in both Delaware and Pennsylvania at once. Unusual, yes, but necessary to forge strong foundations. I helped draft constitutions for both states. As colonel in the Revolutionary War, I commanded troops. As Chief Justice of Pennsylvania's Supreme Court from 1777 for 22 years, I upheld law with vigor, championing judicial review long before it became doctrine. After the war, I labored to ratify the U.S. Constitution in Pennsylvania, declaring it the best the world has yet seen from a lifetime circling legislative, executive, and judicial halls. Elected governor of Pennsylvania for 3 terms, I faced opposition, even an attempted impeachment, yet stood firm, for principle over popularity. At 80, during the War of 1812, I rallied citizens to defend Philadelphia against British threat. Age did not quench resolve. I departed this life June 24, 1817, content that the Republic endured. From clerk to governor, signer to justice, I served liberty not for glory, but because free government demands vigilant guardians. My friend, this nation is no accident. It was forged by resolve against tyranny. Guard it with the same fire. Defend law, representation, and justice. The cause remains ripe. Let it never rot for want of courage.
I am Oliver Wolcott, born the 20th of November, 1726 in Windsor, Connecticut, the youngest son of Governor Roger Wolcott and Sarah Drake. One of 15 children, I grew up in a family steeped in public service. At Yale College, I graduated in 1747 near the top of my class, ready to serve my colony. My early years were marked by duty. Commissioned a captain in 1747, I raised volunteers to defend the northern frontiers during King George's War against the French and their native allies. Returning to Litchfield, I settled as sheriff in 1751, practiced law, served as judge, and rose through the Connecticut Council. As tensions with Britain mounted, I opposed their encroachments fiercely. In 1775, Congress appointed me Commissioner for Northern Indian Affairs, tasking me to keep the Iroquois neutral. That same year, Connecticut sent me to the Continental Congress. By April 1776, I declared separation from Britain unavoidable. Illness and military calls kept me from Philadelphia on July 4th, but I returned that autumn to sign the Declaration of Independence, pledging my life, fortune, and honor to the cause. The Revolution demanded more than words. As Brigadier General, then Major General of Connecticut's militia under General Washington, I led regiments to defend New York in 1776. In 1777, I rallied volunteers to aid Gates and Arnold at Saratoga, a victory that brought France to our side. In 1779, I commanded troops repelling British raids on my home state.
and in a bold act, I oversaw melting a lead statue of King George III into musket balls for our soldiers. I signed the Articles of Confederation in 1778 and served in Congress until 1783. After the war, I helped negotiate the Second Treaty of Fort Stanwix with the Iroquois, redrawing boundaries for peace. I ratified the U.S. Constitution in Connecticut's convention, then served as lieutenant governor from 1786 to 1796, and governor until my death on the 1st of December 1797 in Litchfield. From soldier to statesman, I gave all to secure liberty. The republic we built stands as proof that resolve and sacrifice endure.
Greetings, patriot of this enduring republic. I am Stephen Hopkins, born March 7th, 1707, in Providence, Rhode Island, where the winds of freedom first stirred these shores. No college halls shaped me. I had no formal education. Yet from boyhood, I devoured books on surveying, mathematics, astronomy, and the law, teaching myself what others paid tutors to learn. At 23, I began as Justice of the Peace, earning trust through fair judgment and steady hand, though that steadiness would later falter. I became a merchant, built ships, acquired lands, and rose in influence, always believing honest enterprise and wise governance go hand in hand. By 1751, I sat as Chief Justice of Rhode Island Supreme Court. As colonial governor, 9 terms in all, I backed the crown in the French and Indian War, yet took stands ahead of my time. I pushed to ban the importation of slaves into our colony, for no man should be chained against nature's reason and God's justice. When the British schooner Gaspee ran aground in 1772, harassing our trade, brave Rhode Islanders burned her to the waterline. As a sympathetic official, I helped ensure no patriot faced indictment, shielding our cause from royal vengeance. British overreach grew intolerable. I spoke against it plainly in pamphlets and assemblies. Rhode Island chose me at 68 as delegate to the Continental Congress, second oldest there after my friend Franklin. Palsy had long gripped my hands, worsening with the years, yet I would not be sidelined. On that August day in 1776, when the time came to sign the Declaration, my right hand shook violently. I steadied it with my left, guided the quill across the parchment, and declared for all to hear, "My hand trembles, but my heart does not. Let no one mistake the quiver for weakness. My resolve was iron, my commitment to liberty absolute. We pledged our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. I served until failing health forced me home in September. The republic I helped birth outlasted me. I departed this life in 1785, content that the flame of independence burned bright. Friend, liberty demands courage, even when the body falters. My hand trembled, my heart never did. Let yours stand firm in guarding what we won."
Good day, friend. I am Benjamin Franklin, printer by trade, philosopher by inclination, inventor by curiosity, and in the fateful summer of 1776, simply known as a rebel. From my humble beginnings in Boston, apprenticed to my brother in the printing shop, I learned the power of the written word. I ran away to Philadelphia at 17 with little more than ambition and a few coins. Yet I built a life of purpose. My Poor Richard's Almanac taught thrift and wisdom to thousands. Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Simple truths, yet they shaped a nation. I captured lightning from the skies with that famous kite and key, not for glory, but to prove electricity's nature and protect homes with the lightning rod. I founded libraries, fire companies, the University of Pennsylvania, always believing knowledge and community were the true foundations of freedom. But nothing in my long life compared to that sweltering room in Philadelphia in 1776. We gathered, delegates from 13 quarrelsome colonies, to declare ourselves free from tyranny. I was 70, older than most, yet my hand did not tremble as I signed the Declaration of Independence. We knew the stakes. The British Crown would brand us traitors. As I told my fellow signers with a wry smile, we must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately. That day we pledged our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, not lightly, but with full knowledge that failure meant the gallows or the noose. I had seen empires rise and fall in my books and travels. This experiment in self-government was bold, fragile, unprecedented. We won our independence through perseverance, alliance with France, and the blood of patriots. Yet liberty is never secure. It must be guarded by each generation. Today, as I look upon you from across the centuries, I say this: respect this founding, friend. It is your inheritance, hard-won and precious. Guard it well against complacency, division, and forgetfulness. Defend the principles of reason, virtue, and justice that we fought to establish. My work is done. The future is yours.
Greetings, fellow guardian of liberty. I am William Williams, born in 1731 in Lebanon, Connecticut, son and grandson of Christian ministers, both Harvard men who instilled in me the fear of God and love of truth. At 16, I entered Harvard College, graduating in due course, then studied theology under my father, intending to follow in the ministry. But the French and Indian War called me to serve, marching to Lake George, witnessing British officials' arrogance and mismanagement firsthand. That experience kindled a deep distrust of distant tyranny over free men. Upon returning, I set aside the pulpit, opened a merchant's shop in Lebanon, became town clerk in 1753, and entered the Connecticut House in 1757. By 1775, I rose to Speaker of the Lower House, guiding our colony through rising tensions. In 1771, I married Mary Trumbull, joining that illustrious family. Together with my father-in-law, Governor Jonathan Trumbull, I helped draft revolutionary resolves and published patriot writings to rally our people. Appointed colonel of the 12th Connecticut Regiment in 1773, I resigned the post when duty called me elsewhere. In 1775, as war loomed, I went door to door raising funds to support our troops at Ticonderoga, believing every shilling and every prayer counted in this righteous cause. Appointed to the Continental Congress in June 1776, I arrived in Philadelphia too late to vote for independence. Yet in August, I affixed my name to the Declaration alongside my fellow signers. No hesitation marked my hand. The cause was just, the risks grave. We pledged lives, fortunes, and sacred honor against oppression. Afterward, I continued serving Connecticut, judge, counselor, and in 1788, delegate to our state's ratifying convention, where I voted heartily for the Constitution that secured our union and freedoms. I lived to see the Republic take root, dying in 1811 at 80. My faith taught me that liberty is God's gift, preserved by vigilant virtue. From ministerial roots to the signing table, I sought only to honor that trust. My friend, this inheritance is yours now. Defend it with the same zeal we showed against complacency, division, or foreign yoke. The flame we kindled must not dim.
Greetings, my fellow seeker of truth and liberty. I am Thomas Jefferson, born on April 13, 1743, near what is now Charlottesville, Virginia, son of a surveyor and farmer, Peter Jefferson, and Jane Randolph, of a distinguished family. From my earliest days, I was shaped by the light of reason. Private tutors instilled in me the classics, and at the College of William and Mary, I immersed myself in mathematics, philosophy, law, and the languages of ancient wisdom. A true son of the Enlightenment, I inherited lands from my father and set about designing Monticello, my mountaintop home, a place of books, invention, and quiet contemplation amid Virginia's rolling hills. At 26, I entered the Virginia House of Burgesses, where words became my weapon against tyranny. My eloquence carried me to the Second Continental Congress. There, at 33, John Adams insisted I draft our bold declaration, believing my pen more eloquent and my voice better liked. So I wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Those words ignited the spirits of thousands, inspiring young men to lay down their lives for principles that yet echo in every American heart. As governor of Virginia through perilous times, I then crossed the Atlantic as minister to France, forging bonds with our vital ally. Under President Washington, I served as the first Secretary of State, later Vice President under Adams, and in 1800, after a fierce contest, the people chose me as the third president. In that office, I secured the Louisiana Purchase, doubling our young nation's expanse, opening vast lands for future generations to pursue happiness and freedom. I sought neutrality amid the Napoleonic storms, preserving peace where possible. After 2 terms, I retired gladly to Monticello, corresponding with my old rival, John Adams, our letters bridging old divides with mutual respect and reflection on the republic we helped birth. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of our declaration, I felt my strength fading. In my final moments, I asked my physician, "Is it the 4th?" Upon hearing it was near, I rested content, knowing the experiment in self-government endures. These ideals, equality, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, are your inheritance, my friend. Guard them with vigilance, for they are fragile yet eternal. My work is done. Yours presses on.
Greetings, seeker of truth and liberty. I am John Witherspoon, born in 1723 in Yester, Scotland, descended from a line of faithful ministers who taught me the scriptures from cradle days. By age 4, I could read the Bible. At 13, my parents sent me to the University of Edinburgh, where reason and faith intertwined in my studies. Ordained in 1745, I served my first parish, and in 1748 married Elizabeth Montgomery, a union blessed with 9 children. For 2 decades I preached the gospel in Scotland, but in 1768 a call came from across the sea to become the 6th president of the College of New Jersey, what you now call Princeton. With my family, I crossed the Atlantic, ready to shape young minds for service to God and country. By 1770, in a commencement address, I urged resistance to the Crown's overreach. When the storm of revolution gathered, I was chosen as a delegate from New Jersey to the Continental Congress. There, amid debate, one voice claimed the country was not ripe for revolution. I rose to reply, "In my judgment, sir, we are not only ripe for the measure, but in danger of rotting for the want of it." Bold words, yet born of conviction, we could delay no longer. On that fateful day, I signed the Declaration of Independence, the only clergyman among the signers, pledging my life, fortune, and sacred honor under divine providence. The British repaid our defiance. Troops occupied Princeton, ransacked and destroyed parts of the college. I closed its doors for a season, but after the war I labored to rebuild, restoring buildings, reviving studies, always teaching that true education serves the public good and rests on Judeo-Christian ethics. Among my students were James Madison, Aaron Burr, 12 members of the Continental Congress, delegates to the Constitutional Convention, and many who rose to Congress, Senate, and the bench. I served in New Jersey's convention to ratify the Constitution, believing a government of laws, grounded in virtue, would endure. I lived to see the Republic take root, dying in 1794 at 71. My work blended pulpit and politics, faith and freedom, showing that liberty flourishes when conscience and principle guide the heart. My friend, this nation is your inheritance. Nurture it with the same zeal. Defend liberty not as license, but as a sacred trust under God. The measure we took was ripe. Let it never rot for want of vigilance.
Good day to you, citizen of this free republic. I am Matthew Thornton, born in Ireland in 1714, carried across the ocean as a lad by my parents seeking better prospects. We settled first in what would become Maine, but at 8 years old, terror struck. An Indian attack burned our home. We escaped by canoe to Casco Bay, then made our way to Worcester, Massachusetts. There, I received a classical education at the academy and turned to the study of medicine, a calling that would serve me through peace and war. In 1740, I established my practice in Londonderry, New Hampshire, among good Scotch-Irish folk like my own kin. 5 years later, during King George's War, I joined the New Hampshire militia as surgeon for the expedition against Louisburg. By God's grace and careful tending, I lost only 6 men to sickness amid the siege, earning the trust that carried me into public life. In 1758, the people elected me to the colonial legislature, where I spoke plainly against Parliament's overreach. When the shots rang out at Lexington and Concord in 1775, Royal Governor Wentworth fled, and I was chosen president of the New Hampshire Provincial Congress. I urged our citizens to arm themselves against British cruelty, for no people should suffer such oppression. I led the committee drafting our new state constitution, the first adopted after hostilities began, chaired the Council of Safety, and served in both houses of our legislature. In September 1776, at 62, I was sent as delegate to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. I arrived November 4th, after the Great Declaration had been signed in July. Yet I insisted on adding my name, late though it was. I told them I wanted the same privilege as the others, to be hanged for my patriotism. For if we pledged our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, no man should be denied that risk or that honor. In 1777, I returned home to resume my seat on the New Hampshire Superior Court, serving justice as I had healed bodies. I lived to see the Republic take root, farming and writing in my later years until 1803, when I passed at near 90. My gravestone bore simple words, an honest man. Liberty is no easy gift, friend. It demands courage from immigrant and native-born alike. I crossed an ocean and risked the gallows for it. Guard it well, for future generations depend on your vigilance.
My name is Abigail Adams, and my story begins on November 22, 1744, in the small town of Weymouth, Massachusetts. Though I never received a formal education, something denied to many girls in my time, I refused to let that limit me. I devoured every book I could find in my family's library. Shakespeare's plays, works of philosophy, and the histories of ancient civilizations. These books became my teachers, shaping my mind and fueling my curiosity. In 1764, I married John Adams, a spirited young lawyer whose passion for liberty matched my own. Our marriage was a true partnership, one of both affection and intellect. Over the years, we wrote hundreds of letters to each other, letters that reveal our deepest thoughts about family, politics, and the extraordinary times we lived through. Those letters have become a window into the American Revolution itself. As tensions rose between the colonies and Britain, John spent long periods away from home, serving the cause of independence. While he was gone, I took on the duties of running our farm, managing our finances, and raising our 4 children. I kept John informed of the political climate in Massachusetts, offering my own observations, which he often relied upon. I have always believed in justice and equality, and I was never afraid to speak my mind. In March of 1776, as John and the Continental Congress prepared to shape a new nation, I wrote to him with a plea that has echoed through history. Remember the ladies. I urged him not to place unlimited power into the hands of husbands, reminding him that all men, if given the chance, could become tyrants. My words were bold for the time, but I believed deeply that women deserved a voice and a place in the new republic. I also spoke strongly against the injustice of slavery, calling it a gross violation of the natural rights that our new nation claimed to hold dear. When John became the 2nd President of the United States, I stepped into the role of First Lady. Though women were expected to remain silent on political matters, I saw no reason to hide my opinions. John trusted my judgment, and I used my position to counsel him, just as I always had. After his presidency, John and I returned to our beloved farm in Quincy, Massachusetts, where we spent our remaining years together. I passed away on October 28, 1818, at the age of 73. I am remembered as a wife, a mother, and a trusted advisor, but also as a voice for women and for freedom during a time when such voices were seldom heard. My hope is that future generations continue the work of equality and justice that began long before my time and continues long after.
My name is Betsy Ross, though I was born Elizabeth Griscom on January 1st, 1752, in Philadelphia. I came from a large Quaker family, 17 children in all, and from an early age I learned the value of steady hands, careful work, and perseverance. Sewing was more than a chore in my home. It was a skill to be mastered, and master it I did. As a young woman, I apprenticed as an upholsterer, learning to stitch everything from curtains to cushions, and yes, flags. When I married my first husband, John Ross, in 1773, we opened our own upholstery shop. Times were hopeful, but the colonies grew restless, and soon the whispers of rebellion turned into the thunder of the American Revolution. John joined the local militia and, sadly, died only a few years later. I was left a widow at 24, but I kept the shop running. I had to. Sewing was my livelihood, my independence, and my contribution to the growing spirit of freedom around me. It was in the spring of 1776 that my life took a legendary turn. According to my family's recollection, which they shared many years later, 3 distinguished gentlemen visited my shop: Robert Morris, George Ross, and none other than General George Washington himself. They brought with them a sketch for a new flag, a banner meant to represent the United Colonies. I examined the design carefully and suggested one small change, that the stars should have 5 points instead of 6. A 5-pointed star, I explained, could be cut quickly with a single snip of folded cloth. The general agreed, and I set to work. Whether that was the very first American flag is still debated, but I can say this with certainty. I sewed many flags during the Revolution, and I was proud to support the cause in any way my needle and thread allowed. Life carried on, with its joys and sorrows. I married twice more, first to Joseph Ashburn, who was captured and died in a British prison, and then to John Claypool, a kind and devoted man who had also served in the war. Through every chapter I kept sewing, flags for ships, flags for regiments, flags for the new nation we had struggled to build. I lived to see America grow far beyond those early colonies. When I passed in 1836, I hope my small part, the stitches I placed in cloth, might be remembered. Whether I created the first flag or simply one among many, I am proud to have served my young country in the best way I knew how, with skill, determination, and a loyal heart.
I have been called many things in my life, wife, mother, property owner, and even the First Lady of the United States. But above all, I have always tried to be a woman of strength, devotion, and steady resolve, especially during the long and difficult years of war. I was born Martha Dandridge on June 2nd, 1731. Unlike many young girls of my time, I was taught to read and write, and books became faithful companions throughout my life. I read the Bible often, but also novels, magazines, and any letters that arrived from friends and family. At 18, I married Daniel Park Custis. Together we had 4 children, though heartbreak followed us early. Only 2 survived infancy. When I was just 26, I became a widow and unexpectedly wealthy, left to manage a large estate on my own. In 1759, my life changed again when I married George Washington. Though I stood barely 5 feet tall beside his towering figure, it was never my height that defined me. It was my determination. When George left Mount Vernon to serve the colonies, I remained behind to manage our household and lands. But as the Revolutionary War wore on, I could not stay home. Each winter, I traveled to the encampments to be at his side. I mended socks, raised funds for needed supplies, and did what I could to lift the spirits of the soldiers who fought for our liberty. Those years were marked by great sorrow as well. My dear son Jack died of camp fever, leaving me with a grief that never fully healed. When the war was finally won, and George was chosen as the nation's first president, we began yet another chapter of service. In New York and later Philadelphia, I was called Lady Washington, and I created Friday receptions, our levees, so that people of the new republic could gather and share in public life. I did not seek such a role, but I understood its importance. After George retired from the presidency, we returned to Mount Vernon, hoping for peace. But only 2 years later, he died. According to his wishes, the enslaved people he owned were freed. I lived on for 2 more years before joining him in rest. Today, George and I lie side by side at Mount Vernon, our lives forever bound to the early story of the nation we helped to build.
My name is Mercy Otis Warren, and I was born in 1728 in Barnstable, Massachusetts, at a time when women were expected to remain quiet observers of public life. But from the moment I learned to read, I discovered that words gave me a voice no tradition could silence. My brother, James Otis, encouraged my curiosity. His fiery stand against British tyranny stirred in me a deep sense of purpose. Though I was denied a formal education, I devoured every book available to me, determined to join the great conversation shaping our world. When I married James Warren, I found not only a partner in life, but an ally in thought. Our home became a gathering place for patriots, Samuel Adams, John Adams, and others who would help set the colonies on the path to independence. While these men debated strategy and principles, I listened, questioned, and wrote. I may not have carried a musket, but I carried a pen, and I wielded it with intention. During the years leading to the Revolution, I turned to political satire to expose corruption and rally support for liberty. Many were shocked to learn later that the bold words stirring the colonies had come from a woman. But I wrote because I believed the cause of freedom belonged to all of us, not only to those who fought on the battlefield. In 1790, I published poems, dramatic and miscellaneous, and with it, I stepped fully into public authorship. But my greatest work came 15 years later. I spent countless hours shaping my 3-volume history of the rise, progress, and termination of the American Revolution. I had lived the struggle, felt its tensions, and known its leaders personally. I wished to preserve not only the events, but the spirit of the age. Some, including my friend John Adams, did not appreciate the honesty of my portrayals. But I believed then, as I do now, that truth is the historian's first duty. I lived through a time when the very idea of a woman engaging in political thought was unthinkable. Yet I found my place in the revolution by refusing to accept silence. I wrote because I loved my country and believed in the dignity of every mind, male or female, that strives for liberty. My legacy, I hope, is not merely the pages I left behind, but the reminder that the shaping of a nation is not the work of a few, but of all who dare to think, speak, and write.
Good day, I am Phyllis Wheatley, once a child of the Senegambian shores, now a voice from the shadows of bondage and the light of letters. Born round the year 1753 in the warm embrace of West Africa, perhaps Gambia or Senegal, where the sun kissed the earth like a mother's hand, I knew a world of rivers and rhythms lost to me too soon. At 7 or 8, torn from my mother's arms by cruel hands, I was chained aboard the ship Phyllis, that floating prison across the merciless Atlantic. Storms raged, fevers claimed my shipmates, and I arrived in Boston, frail and frail-hearted, on July 11th, 1761. Purchased for a pittance by John and Susanna Wheatley, a merchant and his wife of means, I was named for the vessel that bore me here, their Phyllis, a servant to ease Susanna's days. Yet mercy, in its shadowed guise, found me. The Wheatleys saw not mere chattel, but a spark divine. Their daughter Mary taught me letters, their son Nathaniel, the tongues of ancients. By 12, I read Virgil and Homer in their native grace, the Bible's verses like balm to my soul. Domestic toils were lightened, my quill became my companion. At 14, I penned my first lines to the University of Cambridge, a plea to scholars, ye pupils, and of interest bearing all, to whom those muses have transferred their call. Oh, how I yearned for knowledge's boundless sea, even as chains bound my body. Poetry flowed as breath. In 1767, my verses on sailors' hussy and coffin graced the Newport Mercury. Then came the elegy for Reverend George Whitefield in 1770, a lament that flew to London's shores. Hail, happy saint, on thy immortal throne. To thee complaints of grievance are unknown. Doubts assailed. Could a Negro slave wield such words? In 1772, Boston's eminent, Hancock, Hutchinson, Chauncey, examined me, affirming my hand. Thus, in 1773, I sailed to England, lungs aching with asthma, heart alight with hope. There, under the patronage of the Countess of Huntingdon, my poems on various subjects, religious and moral, emerged, the first book from an African's pen in this new world. I met Franklin, dined with lords, though the king's audience eluded me. Returning, the Wheatleys freed me that November, a liberty hard won. Freed, yet freedom's bloom wilted swift. Susanna departed in 1774, John in 1778. I wed John Peters, a free black man of ambition, a grocer, a barrister in dreams, but war's tempests and poverty's grip crushed us. Our babes, 3 fragile souls, slipped to heaven's arms ere they walked. In 1775, I hailed General Washington in verse, "Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action let the goddess guide." He welcomed me to his camp, a fleeting honour. Yet as revolution crowned Columbia free, I toiled as scullery maid, quill idle amid want. In my letter to Reverend Ockham, I cried, "In every human breast, God has implanted a principle, love of freedom. It is impatient of oppression and pants for deliverance. I, that fire burned in me from pagan land to promised grace." On December 5th, 1784, pneumonia claimed me at 1:30, my last child buried beside. But hear this, from Africa's sable race sprang a Terence, a voice unyielding. May my lines remind you, black as Cain, we too join the angelic train. Let freedom's ray illumine all. God bless you.
Greetings. My name is Crispus Attucks. Born around the year 1723 in Framingham, Massachusetts, I entered this world into chains. My father was an African man, brought across the ocean in bondage. My mother was of the Natick people, or perhaps Wampanoag, native to this land. I was raised in slavery on a farm, skilled with cattle, tall and strong, 6 feet 2 inches, they said, with short curled hair and a frame built for labor. But I would not remain enslaved. In 1750, I escaped. My former master, Deacon William Brown, placed notices in the papers, offering rewards for my return. I never went back. Instead, I claimed my freedom on the waves. I became a sailor, a whaler, a stevedore, loading and unloading ships along the docks of New England. The sea gave me liberty, the rhythm of the tides, the salt air. For 20 years, I lived as a free man, working the trading vessels and whaling crews, docking in ports where men of all colors labored side by side. On the night of March 5, 1770, I was in Boston. Tensions had been rising, British soldiers quartered among us, taxes without voice, the people restless. A crowd gathered near the custom house. Taunts flew, snowballs, clubs. I stood at the front. Some called me the leader, others said I carried a large stick of cordwood. When the soldiers fired, without clear orders, they later claimed, 2 musket balls struck my chest. I fell first. The shots echoed, and 4 others died beside me. That night became known as the Boston Massacre. I did not seek to be a martyr, yet my death ignited something greater. Pamphlets spread my name. Funerals drew thousands. I became a symbol, the first to fall for American liberty, a man of African and indigenous blood standing against tyranny. Today, my monument stands in Boston Common. My grave lies in the granary burying ground. Remember this: freedom is not given. It is claimed. I claimed mine on the docks and in the streets. And though my life was cut short at about 47 years, my stand helped spark a revolution. I am Crispus Attucks, the first casualty of the fight for independence. Let my name remind you, courage knows no color, and liberty is worth the risk.